So I'm going to talk to you a little about the vehicle electrification initiatives at the DEP, some state policy and legislative action that has happened over the past couple of months that will influence the state, and some of the statewide initiatives. I want to say hello to my colleagues. I know you know this, but I say it every time I do a presentation. Vehicles cause air pollution, and that's why the Department of Environmental Protection is taking the lead on vehicle electrification in New Jersey. Nearly 75% of the nitrogen oxides that cause ozone come from transportation, and a quarter of the fine particulates come from the transportation sector. And together, those two pollutants cause asthma, emphysema, heart disease, premature death, and cancer. This is a major public health issue. And of course, transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gases, both in New Jersey and across the United States. Almost half of New Jersey's greenhouse gases are from the transportation sector. Electric vehicles are about 80% cleaner than gasoline vehicles, and that includes emissions from the power plants that charge the batteries. So if you walk away with one thing today, walk away with that. Electric vehicles are 80% cleaner than gasoline vehicles, including the power plants. A lot of times I hear, and I had the same question before I got into this field, aren't you just moving pollution from the tailpipe to the smokestack? And the answer is no. So I'm going to talk about a major state initiative, the Energy Master Plan, some major legislation that came out of the legislature and was signed by the governor in January that will affect the electric vehicle market, and a few of the tools that I highlight for local governments when I go to talk to them, when they're interested in preparing their towns for electric vehicles and electrifying their own fleets. I left a flyer on the back table that has links to all of the things that I will be talking about. I'm from Philadelphia. I talk as fast as people who live in New Jersey, so don't worry about writing things down. There's a flyer in the back. So the Energy Master Plan is the Murphy administration's roadmap for energy for the next 3 or so years. Is energy broadly defined? Energy production, distribution, heating, use for industrial, and transportation. And for the first time, the Energy Master Plan, which comes out about every 3 years, has a substantive section on transportation. The previous Energy Master Plans have had a couple of roughly vague paragraphs with a couple of roughly vague goals. The transportation section of this EMP is about 35 pages, with real goals, real discussion, real milestones, real deadlines. One of the goals to meet the energy and greenhouse gas goals is nearly 100% electrification of the transportation sector by 2050. And what is pushing that is the EMP's goal of 100% clean energy by 2050, and meeting the targets of the Global Warming Response Act, which requires reduction in greenhouse gases of 80% below the 2006 baseline by 2050. Those are steep reductions, and much of it will have to come from the transportation sector. The other major policy thing that happened in January is that the legislature passed and Governor Murphy signed an electric vehicle bill. It was Senate Bill 2252. It's an omnibus bill. I'm going to give you some of the highlights. The program that I think will move the market the most is it established a rebate program for electric vehicle purchases. New Jersey had a state sales tax exemption for the purchase of electric vehicles, but no rebate program. That was one of the most effective policy mechanisms that we've seen across the United States in terms of boosting EV sales, because electric vehicles are still more expensive than comparable gasoline vehicles. So here we're trying to bring them to parity. The rebate program will be run by the Board of Public Utilities. It will give car buyers up to $5,000 towards the purchase or lease of a new electric vehicle that is purchased and registered in New Jersey. There's higher rebate for cars with bigger batteries and longer ranges, smaller rebate for smaller batteries with shorter ranges and plug-in hybrids. This is going to be the big mover of the market over the next few years. This is a $300 million 10-year rebate program. And what is nice is that even though the program is not up and running, it is retroactive to January 17th. So any electric vehicle that was purchased on or after January 17th is eligible for a rebate. So the Board of Public Utilities will be rolling that out shortly in 2 phases. One phase is for consumers to get the rebate in the mail, and then the full phase will be dealers will provide the rebate at the time of purchase, and the dealers will apply for the rebate online. So look for this. This is a big deal. The legislation also gave BPU the authority to set up a rebate program for home charging stations. So we'll be looking for that as well. The legislation set aggressive goals for the number of electric vehicles on the road and for charging infrastructure. So by 2025, 330,000 electric vehicles on New Jersey's roadways. That is 10 times the number of electric vehicles on the road today in New Jersey. A goal of 2 million by 2035. For public charging stations, 400 public charging stations at, 400 public fast charging stations at 200 locations statewide by 2035, as well as the lower power level 2 stations that you see at supermarkets and outside of coffee shops. It set goals for charging stations at multifamily homes and also at hotels and motels. And it set requirements to electrify the state-owned fleet. So by the end of 2035, 6 years from now, 25% of state-owned light-duty non-emergency vehicles must be electric, and one of my roles is working to do that for DEP and working for my colleagues at other state agencies to determine what we need to do to electrify the state-owned fleet and put in the necessary charging infrastructure so that the state can lead by example. Some additional DEP tasks. By the end of this year, we are required to set goals for medium and heavy duty electric vehicles, both for vehicles and for charging infrastructure. We're required to enlarge our consumer education campaign, and we're required to develop a report on the state of the market and identify policy and legislative barriers to widespread adoption of electric vehicles. There's a lot more in the bill. These are, I think, are the highlights and the most important portions that are going to move the market the fastest and that are going to lead the state government to lead by example and also to be able to assist local governments in their efforts. Another change this year is that there are now electric vehicles on the state contract. This was a big barrier. Procurement is difficult, we all know. And so now there are 5 EVs on state contract. We have sedans, we have hatchbacks, we have pure electrics, we have plug-in hybrids, and a minivan. And so this makes procurement easier for state agency, but also for the other public entities that are eligible to purchase off of the state contracts. And that includes local governments and counties. There are other procurement tools that I talk to when I talk to local governments. This is another one, the Climate Mayor's EV Purchasing Collaborative. It is a collaborating purchasing initiative. They also developed an RFP and went through a procurement process that it will meet most government standards. So local governments can buy electric vehicles and charging stations off of this contract if the local procurement laws allow for that, and most do, because it was built for that purpose. The Board of Public Utilities this year launched a small incentive program to help local governments buy electric vehicles for their fleet. It's called the Clean Fleet EV Incentive Program. It gives $4,000 for a pure battery electric vehicle and some money for a charging station. The application deadline for that is April 15th. and vehicles must be purchased by the beginning of June. This is a pilot program. BPU hopes to continue this program into the future. This was established before the rebate program was set, so this may or may not continue based on how BPU sets up the rebate program. BPU is still setting up the program rules. The legislation gave BPU a great deal of discretion, so we don't know at this point whether the rebates will be just for individuals and families, or whether they will also be available for local governments and for government and corporate fleets. So that's something we will all be looking for as BPU rolls out the grant program. In the meantime, BPU has this smaller grant program to help local governments begin their transformation. DEP has a grant program called It Pays to Plug In. This helps lower the cost for charging stations, both for the purchase and installation and operation. We've run this program for about 4 years now, and thank you to NJTPA for approving our application for CMAQ funds for that program. It gives up to $6,000 per charging station, everywhere except individual family homes. So we're talking public places, workplaces, both for employees who drive their own EVs to work and also for fleet vehicles, multifamily homes, and electric shared mobility programs like electric car share or electric ride share. This year, we will be adding eligibility for DC fast chargers for some uses. This is a major change because these are major investments. They're very expensive, but they're important for public perception. About 90% of charging happens at home or at work. The public fast chargers are there for confidence and for longer trips. So even though most charging happens at home or at work, it is crucial that we get the public fast chargers out on the road to give confidence to drivers that no matter when they need a charge or where they need a charge, they will have it. And so that is one of the places we're focusing our energy at DEP is on deploying fast chargers. Look for that within the next month or two. You've probably heard of the Volkswagen Settlement. This was $72.2 million that came to New Jersey as a result of a settlement with Volkswagen for their vehicle fraud. We have given out money for charging stations. In fact, this money, the $3.2 million, will double the number of non-residential charging stations in the state, which we're very excited about. The other priority for this pot of money is medium and heavy duty vehicles in environmental justice communities. So we have given money to NJ Transit for their first electric bus pilot for NJ Transit buses in Camden. Thank you to NJ Transit. Money to local governments for electric school buses, garbage trucks, to corporations for delivery trucks, and to the for port trucks and equipment, and airport ground source equipment. These are major sources of ozone and particulates in the areas that are most vulnerable with the people that are most vulnerable. And the Murphy administration has chosen to target this Volkswagen money early to provide electric vehicles in environmental justice communities so that the benefits of electrification go to everybody, not only to people who can afford to buy their own electric cars, which still are expensive. We will put out 2 more solicitations for Volkswagen funding. We expect the next one to go out within the next month or so. The priorities will be the same: electric vehicle charging infrastructure and electric medium and heavy duty vehicles in environmental justice communities. I always point out the guidebook that was put together by NJTPA that helps guide municipalities in electric vehicle readiness, both for their own fleets and thinking through how to make their towns EV friendly. This is another new project for us. DEP has been tasked with identifying ways to speed the local approval process for charging infrastructure, especially for fast chargers. What we're hearing from the charging industry is that it is taking much longer to get local approvals for fast chargers here than in some other parts of the country. We think that much of that is just due to a lack of familiarity about what charging stations are, how much electricity is required, why they should be treated differently from buildings and gas stations and other uses. So we think that some of that may be some education, but other of it may be real barriers to doing things quickly, permitting quickly. So we have a certified planner working with us, and we're talking to local governments and to the industry and to folks across the country and to the planners to help understand if there's a way that we can help local governments move more smoothly through the permitting process, both to lighten the load on the local governments and to be able to get the charging infrastructure out there faster. So a few things to look for in 2020. As I mentioned, we're looking at the local approval process. BPU will roll out their rebate program for electric vehicle purchases, and we will be looking to see whether local governments and fleets are eligible now or will be eligible within a year or two. We'll be putting out the solicitation for the Volkswagen Settlement funding. We are doing strategic mapping and planning to determine what the best places are for charging infrastructure across the state. So expect us to roll out a map within the next month or so as part of an ongoing mapping process. The Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, our first auction will happen this month, and the strategic funding plan will come out in April. So Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative is a regional cap and trade program to reduce emissions from the electricity sector. It brings money to the state. The money is split between 3 state agencies, and the state is now formulating a spending plan for that money. It will be used to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and there is an interest in using some of that money for clean transportation. So we'll be keeping an eye out on what the government's plans are to allocate that money, how it will be used by the state agencies, and how it will be used for transportation electrification. So just click a couple useful websites if you'd like to poke around further. This is Drive Green, New Jersey. This is DEP's electric vehicle website. Drive Change, Drive Electric is supported financially by governments, but is not written by bureaucrats, so it's a little easier to read. And feel free to contact me. I have my card, and I would be happy to talk to anybody about your thoughts about EV readiness or electrifying your fleet or your planning efforts. And again, I put a flyer out on the back table with all of the links that are in here, and I'll be here until the end of the meeting. Feel free to come and take my card. Thank you very much. Any questions? We have time for questions? Yes.
I do have one question. If
yes.
a local business wants to put a charger in,
yes.
they permitted to charge the user for using that?
Yes, they are. In fact, we don't take a position on whether to provide free charging or not. It might be nice for local government, if they want to offer free charging, to buy a charger that can require payment. So if they see that their costs are more than they want to bear, they can then switch. So the network's chargers can be set up to allow free charging or to take payment for charging, and the local governments can, or businesses can set the rates just through the computer. Yes, yes.
I have 3 quick questions.
Yes.
Number 1, could you define an environmental justice community, and you shed any light on the plans to mitigate the environmental impact of battery disposal? Yes. And also from a budgetary standpoint, as all of us run our individual county budgets, what do you anticipate the cost of overall cost of operation yes. for vehicles by comparison to current fossil fuel vehicles?
Good. Yes.
What our budget should
yes, so those are good questions, and I'll take the last one first. Electric vehicles are more expensive up front, but over the life of the vehicle, they save money. And the reason is electricity costs about half of what gasoline or diesel costs.
Per mile operation.
Exactly, per mile, cents per mile. And also because they save a lot of money in maintenance and operations. The vehicles are much simpler. They have fewer parts. They break down less. They require less ongoing maintenance and repair. So over the life of the vehicle, you're saving money on a cents per mile basis. Now, there's a big difference whether you're talking about light duty vehicles or medium duty and heavy duty. How fast will you earn back your investment? That really depends on the cost of the on the type of the vehicle. So that was your first question. And the middle
Can I just add
question,
on
yeah,
to
yeah,
what
sure.
you gave on that?
Yes, please.
What about maintenance of those vehicles? Are government agencies that are using those training their staff, or are they farming it out to be maintained?
They could do either. They're under warranty, so just like any other car for the first couple of years, they can use the dealership. If it's a plug-in hybrid vehicle, any maintenance worker who is trained to service regular hybrid vehicles can service the plug-in hybrids. For the all-electrics, they require additional certification, so they will need additional training, or they can farm that out. So the middle question, the first was environmental justice.
What is
Yes.
the definition?
Yes. So for now, we're using urban communities, low and moderate income urban communities. So Camden, Newark, Patterson. The state is due to put out guidance for Executive Order 23, I believe it is, on environmental justice, and we expect a fuller definition to come out along with that guidance for the executive order. In the meantime, we're saying to people who apply for our grant for project and environmental justice, you make the case to us, and it shouldn't be hard to make the case because we know what the communities are, where there are high emissions, a long history of environmental contamination, and low to moderate income and minority communities. And then the third question?
By the way, I appreciate that very much. I'd also
Yes.
urge you to take a look at the rural communities where your overall VMTs
Yes.
is very high.
Yes,
Therefore, if you want to have an impact, there is an equal impact to be had without question.
right.
My last question was really, we are looking at the CO2 emission impact, sure.
Yes.
But what is the impact overall of battery disposal?
Oh, the battery disposal. That's a good question, and we don't know the answer yet. We're working regionally with our other state partners in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, working with a think tank to investigate those issues. What I can tell you up front is that when a battery is no longer suitable for a car, it still has a lot of energy in it. And energy is valuable, so those batteries are likely to be used. For example, they could be used by utilities for stationary battery storage. And they can be used as stationary batteries in other ways. So we think that that's one of the places that that's going to go because they are so valuable. We're also interested to see what's coming out of the study as far as battery recycling and disposal.
Hi, Andrea.
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. Really encouraging to see everything the state is doing. I have two questions. The
Yes.
first one is about the availability of electric vehicles in this region. So
Yes.
Jersey City has started to convert a lot of our municipal
Yes.
fleet to electric, and we've actually just launched a new on-demand transit service that has
I know.
higher occupancy.
I read about it. Congratulations.
Thank you. And we have a certain percentage of those that are electric, but have been hearing from our partners that there is a real limitation in terms of availability of those vehicles in the region currently.
Yes.
And we expect lots of delays because of the health concerns and parts coming in from China and things like that. So have you experienced that, and do you expect this legislation to affect that positively for there to be greater availability in this region to purchase?
I do. Availability has been one of the issues for consumers. The vehicles have been going to California and to other states that have stronger incentive programs. Now that the rebate has been passed, we expect to see more vehicles at dealerships in New Jersey because they know they're going to be able to sell them. So as an example, we did a presentation at NJCAR, which is the New Jersey Dealership Association. We were slated for a 20-minute presentation, and we ended up having a group discussion with the dealers for well over an hour, almost an hour and a half. They had to cut us off. There's a lot of interest among the dealers now that they know there's a strong incentive that's going to bring people in the door, and they're interested in getting trained, getting certified to sell these, and understanding what people want. So for light duty vehicles, we absolutely expect this legislation to draw more vehicles to dealerships because now they know they can sell them. New Jersey now has the strongest incentive package in the country between the rebate and the sales tax incentive added to the federal incentive. So for light duty vehicles, I absolutely expect to see that and see that happen fast. For medium and heavy duty vehicles, that's a different story, and that's primarily because They are newer to the market, and they're being built and piloted, and there's demand from the other leadership states. So I have less certainty about how quickly that market will grow. I have a good deal of certainty about light duty vehicles at dealerships.
So maybe that answers my next question, but I see that the way to be the most impactful with these policies is to make sure that we're electrifying our mass transit vehicles, transit buses, and things like that. So you
Yes.
mentioned that there were 8 buses in Camden.
Yes.
Does this policy or this legislation mandate additional electrification of New Jersey transit buses? And if that does happen, is it conversion of the existing fleet, or is it adding more capacity and making sure those vehicles are electric? You may not have.
So the answer is yes. Can you address that? Good, because I don't remember the numbers. The answer is yes.
The answer is yes, and there is a specified step up over a number of years for new vehicle purchases.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
And I fully agree with you in terms of impact, but I want to be sure that it is clear that there is some level of participation that is afforded to the rural communities who don't have mass transportation available to them.
Yes.
There is an impact there. This is a distribution of funds that was statewide. We need to make sure that as half this board is representing rural areas, that there is some focus spent on those areas to say that we have an impact. We just as much we should be participating in this program as well.
Yes, I agree with you. And some of the solutions that work in urban areas don't work in rural areas. We've been in discussions with some of our partner states in the Northeast, with some of the more rural states like Vermont, to see what they're doing to bring electrification to their state in a way that serves the rural communities as well. Thank you for that. So, thank you very much. One more question, and I think I should. No.
It's a major problem I see with the a major problem that I see with the energy management plan is it totally ignored electric rail. We already have 300,000 riders on electric rail today, but it's faced savage cuts on my line where Kathy DiFilippo lives in Morris County. 22 train stops a day have been cut. Now, it seems to me like that would be a very good way to make an investment. We have another 50,000 existing rail riders on diesel rail, which should be electrified. And we've calculated, NJARP members, Justine McCurshey, that you could electrify our existing diesel for $300 million. So I think that has to be considered, because not only is it electric, but it achieves all our goals. It gets people out of their cars, less congestion, less roads to maintain. The train stations are already main streets, and we're already having transit-oriented development. So then you have walkable, bikeable communities. And I was really shocked that was not in the energy management plan. I hope that the DEP will consider that. I know that's not what your task is, but okay.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. I think what we can look at in the Energy Master Plan is the recognition that to meet the pollution goals, the clean air goals, and to meet the climate goals, we will need to electrify nearly 100% of the transportation sector broadly defined by 2050. And rail and freight is something that we're going to need to look at, and there are big payoffs, as you mentioned. So thank you very much. Yes, do I have time for more questions?
For the board, yes.
Okay, yes.
So on the topic of rail and rural communities, has there been any talk in the plan about expanding electric rail into the rural communities? We've had a project on the books for 20 years and can't get finished to expand rail to Sussex County.
That's a good question, and I don't know who would answer that. So as the Department of Environmental Protection, we don't have jurisdiction over that, although we certainly encourage it and would support it and would work with our sister agencies to see that happen.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Any more questions from the board? I'm going to break a rule here, and for the benefit, if there's anyone in the public who has a specific question for our speaker, we'll let you ask one brief question. Is there anyone else who had a question?
Neil, over on the side.
In the corner.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Short questions.
Yes.
What will be the total price of the EV rebate program and the charging stations?
Yes.
Number two, will these charging stations also be compatible to charge e-bikes?
Okay. The first question, what will be the total price of the rebate program? And the charging. The rebate program is for vehicles. That is a $300 million program, and that's in the legislation. So $30 million a year, every year for 10 years. The bill did not speak to funding for charging stations. So we are using a variety of funding sources. We're using funding from the Volkswagen Settlement, from other environmental settlements, from federal grants like the congestion mitigation and air quality grants. We got CMAQ grants from all 3 MPOs for charging infrastructure. The bill gave the Board of Public Utilities the discretion to consider using money from the Clean Energy Fund for electric vehicles and charging stations. So to answer how much money will the state be allocating to charging stations, I don't know. How much money will be allocated for rebates to help people buy vehicles? $300 million over 10 years. For electric bikes, I don't know the answer to that. The priority for the charging station has been for light-duty vehicles, and moving forward, medium and heavy-duty vehicles because they're the heavy polluters. I don't know enough about electric bikes to know how these charging stations could be configured to charge them. I do know that the bikes can be plugged into regular outlets. And so that might be the answer, at least in the shorter term, is that bikes, like all electric cars, can be plugged into a regular old house outlet or garage outlet or an outlet like they're, in this room, and they can be charged up.
Thank you. Any additional questions? With that, I want to thank Andrea
Thank
for
you very
being
much.
here today.